All right, so you've brought a really fascinating collection of excerpts for this deep dive, all about Ganesha, the Hindu deity, but we're going to go kind of beyond the mythology and look for those deeper layers of symbolism, maybe some of the philosophical nuggets. And I think what's going to be surprising to people is how these themes of food, fear, and spiritual growth are all intertwined in these stories.
It's fascinating how those come together, Yeah,
it is. And speaking of striking imagery, like that elephant head, it's like one of the most recognizable images out there, right?
It is.
But the story of how Ganesha actually gets that elephant head is so much more than just a cool visual.
Right. I mean, I think most people are familiar with the basic story. Parvati, longing for a son, creates Ganesha from her own essence. And then Shiva, not knowing who this boy is guarding Parvati's door, he beheads him in a fit of rage. And then to appease Parvati, of course, he replaces the head with that of an elephant. So
there's, I mean, just at the surface level, there's a lot of drama there, family drama. But I sense there's something much deeper going on here.
Oh, absolutely.
Than just,
way, way deeper.
A literal beheading.
Yeah, we're talking about masculine and feminine energies. We're talking about the complexity of relationship, balancing the needs of the individual versus the needs of others, It's all there woven into that one event.
So let's unpack some of that, because one of the excerpts you shared mentions this idea of a lion and a deer. And it says, as long as a lion is hungry, the deer lives in fear.
Right.
But once the lion is eaten, the deer's fear kind of dissipates.
Yeah.
So it seems like food plays a powerful role here.
Yeah.
But not just in terms of, our basic need to eat, but in overcoming fear.
Right. I mean, that quote speaks to a much deeper level of fear than just having an empty stomach.
Okay.
This is about the fear of scarcity, the fear of mortality, not knowing your place in the universe.
Yeah, I'm starting to see how this connects back to Ganesha's parents. Because you have Shiva, who initially, at least, represents this kind of detachment from the material world, even kind of sneering at the need for food.
Initially, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And then you have Parvati, who, as Annapurna, literally means the full of food.
Right.
Right. She's the embodiment of nourishment and abundance.
Yeah, and it's really interesting when she disappears and she takes her kitchen with her, and his Ganas, his attendants, really start to feel the absence of food in a very real way.
Like they're suddenly confronted with their own mortality.
Precisely, yeah. Shiva has to transform there. He goes from this sort of disdain for food to really understanding its vital role in this human journey, not just for survival, but for our evolution spiritually as well.
So it's not about rejecting the material world, but it's about kind of integrating it with our spiritual aspirations.
Exactly.
I see. Okay, so we talk about Ganesha as the remover of obstacles.
Right.
But in one of the excerpts, there was this really fascinating point made where it's actually pointed out that Ganesha starts out as an obstacle himself.
He does.
Like standing in Shiva's way, unknowingly defying him.
Right.
I mean, it's a fascinating paradox, isn't it?
It really challenges us to think about whether the obstacles we face are sometimes of our own making,
Right.
And that perhaps overcoming them requires us to turn inward, and really examine our own perspectives, maybe.
Maybe they're there to teach us something.
Yeah.
To help us grow.
They might force us to confront aspects of ourselves that we'd rather ignore. Our own fears, insecurities, resistance to change.
And that makes me think about the elephant head again. It's not just a striking visual, it's loaded with symbolism.
Right. Absolutely.
Like, what is that elephant head trying to tell us?
Well, elephants are incredibly strong and powerful creatures, but they also embody a certain balance. They take what they need from the environment, but they don't hoard or accumulate excessively.
Okay.
And this is in direct contrast to the yakshas, for example, these mythical beings who are driven by fear.
Yeah.
And this desire to secure themselves against the world through wealth and possessions.
Right. So it's almost like that elephant head is representing a more balanced approach in the material world.
Yeah. It's suggesting that true strength doesn't lie in domination or control.
Okay.
But in recognizing our place within the natural order, taking what we need, and respecting the delicate balance of the ecosystem.
It's like the difference between consuming to survive and consuming out of fear.
Exactly.
Consuming out of a need to control.
Yes.
I see.
And this brings us to a very interesting comparison between Kubera, the king of the Yakshas, and Ganesha.
Yeah.
Both associated with wealth and abundance.
Right.
But their approaches are very, very different.
Okay.
Kubera represents this relentless pursuit of security through material possessions, while Ganesha embodies this deeper sense of contentment that comes from within.
So again, it's not about rejecting wealth altogether,
no.
But it's about shifting your perspective on what true abundance is.
Exactly.
I see. And this is where the story of Ganesha becomes relevant to all of us.
Very much so.
Because it challenges us to ask ourselves, like, where do we find ourselves hoarding? Whether it's possessions, time, emotions even, and what would it look like for us to cultivate that same sense of contentment as Ganesha, to recognize that abundance can come from a place of inner peace rather than external things.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's something to think about. I mean, this is already getting me to think about like how these ancient myths really can offer some insights into, our very modern day struggles and aspirations.
Yeah. And as we dive even deeper into his story, we'll uncover even more of those layers of meaning that can help us navigate life with a little more wisdom and grace.
Okay, awesome.
Yeah.
So it's not about like, becoming a monk and renouncing all your possessions.
Yeah.
It's about finding that balance.
It is, yeah. It's finding that sweet spot where you can appreciate material comfort, but it doesn't become your sole focus. And this actually reminds me of some of the festivals that are celebrated in Ganesha's honor, especially before the autumn harvest. There's so much symbolism.
Yeah, I'm hearing like colorful processions and delicious food.
But the creation and immersion of clay Ganesha statues during these festivals, it's particularly poignant.
I've seen images of those, like being carried into the water.
Yeah.
What's the significance of that?
Well, it's a beautiful reminder, I think, of the cyclical nature of life. We have periods of growth, of abundance, like the harvest, but then comes the letting go, the returning to the source.
So it's like saying you can't hold on to things forever, no matter how much you might want.
No matter how much you want to. And that applies not just to material possessions, but to ideas, beliefs, even relationships, that clinging too tightly only creates suffering, We have to learn to embrace the ebb and flow of life and understand that impermanence is a fundamental part of it.
It makes you realize that maybe letting go isn't about loss. It's about making space for something new.
Exactly. And that's perhaps one of the greatest lessons that Ganesha has to offer.
It's interesting because some of the sources present, different versions of Ganesha's, like marital status.
Yeah.
Some portray him as a bachelor.
Right.
Forever in the shadow of his mother, unable to find a wife worthy of her.
The eternal bachelor god, that's a very interesting take.
Yeah, what do you make of that?
I think you could see it as a commentary on the challenges of balancing worldly life with spiritual pursuits.
Right, like maybe the pursuit of enlightenment requires you to detach from, traditional roles.
Absolutely.
And expectations.
Yeah, and then you have other stories that talk about Ganesha having a wife made of a banana tree.
Wait, a banana tree wife?
Kulabao.
Okay, I've never heard that one before.
Yeah.
What's the symbolism there?
Well, think about the banana plant itself. It's so resourceful. Provides food, plates, even shelter. So it's a symbol of the goddess herself, ensuring Ganesha's basic needs are met so that he can focus on higher knowledge.
There's that balance again. It's like you need that solid foundation in the material world to really thrive in the spiritual one.
Absolutely. And speaking of knowledge, there's the story of Ganesha acting as Vyasa's scribe for the Mahabharata, that great Indian epic.
So he's not just a remover of obstacles, but he's also a recorder of wisdom.
Exactly. It highlights his connection to learning, his ability to capture and transmit these profound truths.
Yeah.
And his patience. Can you imagine writing down the entire Mahabharata?
Yeah, that's a big job.
That's commitment.
And we can't forget that broken tusk.
Right.
Like there's all these different stories about how it happened.
So many.
Did he use it to write the epic? Did he strike the moon with it? Was it broken in a battle?
I think the different interpretations only add to the mystery and the depth. You could see it as a symbol of humility.
Okay.
Sacrificing a part of yourself for a greater purpose.
So it's like saying that tree strength isn't about being perfect or invincible.
It's not.
But it's about being willing to give something of yourself.
To give, yeah.
For something bigger.
Exactly. It also challenges our traditional notions of masculinity.
Okay.
You know, the idea that strength has to be so assertive and dominant.
Right.
Ganesha's power is tempered with wisdom and compassion. And let's not forget about the tools that he carries.
Oh, yeah, the axe, the noose.
The axe and the noose, yeah.
Sometimes he's got the sugar cane and the elephant goad.
Right, right. It's all about, what's all that about?
Well, they represent the dualities of existence.
Okay.
You know, the analytical mind that dissects and separates, and then the unifying force that brings it all back together.
Okay.
You could say the axe represents our ability to cut through illusions to get to the heart of things.
Yeah, and the noose.
The noose symbolizes the power of restraint.
Okay.
You know, controlling our desires and impulses.
Okay, so
the sugar cane, you know, the elephant goad, it symbolizes the life-giving and life-taking aspects of nature, you know, that creation and destruction, pleasure and pain.
Constant interplay of opposites.
It seems like Ganesha, with all his paradoxes, really embodies that totality of experience.
Yeah.
You know, acknowledging the light and shadow, the material and the spiritual. He doesn't shy away from any of it.
No, and that's what makes him so compelling. You know, he's not this distant, unattainable deity.
Right.
He's relatable with his love of sweets, his playful nature, and his struggles to navigate the complexities of life.
Yeah.
He reminds us that the path to enlightenment isn't about perfection. It's about embracing that messy, beautiful totality of who we are.
You know, this whole deep dive has really been about confronting fear, hasn't it?
Yeah.
From that lion and deer analogy to the yakshas hoarding wealth.
Right.
It seems like fear is at the root of so much of our suffering.
It is. And Ganesha, you know, with his elephant head, really embodies this overcoming of that fear.
Okay.
He reminds us that true abundance isn't about accumulating more, but about recognizing the richness that's already there within and around us.
That's a powerful message to carry with us.
It is.
But there's one more layer to this whole fear conversation. It has to do with Shiva's actions, his beheadings, and what that reveals about the human tendency to react with aggression when we're faced with the unknown. I mean, it's almost like Shiva's go-to move is just to chop off heads.
It is, yeah.
When he's confronted with something he doesn't understand.
It's a very dramatic reaction.
It's extreme, right.
But, you know, it does reflect a very human tendency to lash out.
Okay.
You know, to eliminate what we don't understand or what threatens our sense of self.
But it's like a fear response, right?
Absolutely. A primal fear response.
Like instead of pausing, trying to understand the situation, we just react.
We just react.
And it's interesting how the source material really emphasizes that, you know, Vinayaka isn't intentionally being an obstacle to Shiva, just carrying out his mother's instructions.
Right. He's doing what he was told.
He doesn't even know who Shiva is.
He doesn't.
So Shiva, in a way, creates the obstacle himself by, you know, not engaging fully with the situation.
Yeah, by not really understanding Parvati's needs and desires.
Right.
You know, it's a reminder that our actions or our inactions, you know, they can have unintended consequences. And we create the very obstacles we then struggle to overcome.
So maybe it's not always about some external force blocking our path. Maybe it's about looking at like how we might be contributing to the problem.
Yeah, and how our fears and insecurities can manifest as these roadblocks in our lives.
Right, and this kind of brings us back to that symbolism of the elephant head. Because the source material makes this interesting distinction between animals and humans.
Yeah.
You know, animals act on instinct. They eat to satisfy hunger, not to accumulate.
They don't worry about, you know, having enough for tomorrow or next year.
Right.
But humans are burdened by these complex emotions, anxieties about the future, fears of scarcity.
So we end up hoarding not just food, but possessions, relationships, experience, all to try to quell that underlying fear.
The underlying fear.
And that's where Ganesha...
That's where he comes in.
Steps in.
Yeah, he's not just the remover of obstacles. He's the embodiment of overcoming that fear.
Okay.
And reminding us that true contentment comes from within.
Right, not from external validation or possessions. So we've gone from fear to feasting, from obstacles to contentment. I mean, Ganesha's story.
It really does offer
such a rich tapestry of wisdom.
Yes. It's amazing how these ancient myths can speak to our modern lives.
Yeah.
in such powerful and surprising ways.
Absolutely. And we started by exploring, the connection between food and fear, but we've ended up uncovering so much more.
We really have, yeah.
It's like Ganesha is inviting us to examine our relationship with abundance, to confront our fears, and to really cultivate that sense of inner peace that doesn't depend on anything external.
Yeah.
That's a really powerful message, I think, to take away.
It is. And maybe the most provocative thought to leave everyone with is, what if the biggest obstacle isn't something external, but something internal? Yeah. Our own fear of letting go of control, of possessions, of even our limited self-image.
It's like that saying, what you resist persists.
Yes.
Maybe true freedom comes from, like, releasing our grip on those things we think we need.
Letting go.
Trusting that abundance will find its way back to us.
Exactly.
That's something to ponder.
It is. It is.
And on that note, we'll leave you to contemplate those possibilities. Until next time, happy diving.